Hey guys, hope you're safe and well. Welcome back to Lockdown Lessons Live. Today it's a beautiful sunny day in St Agnes and the sun is blazing through my window just to the right here, and my wife and children have gone out to the park and it almost feels like normal, which is great. It is Today's lesson is about big ideas in literature and in language, and we're going to be exploring what these big ideas are and how they appear in literature and also how to read them. So that's very much the task for today. I hope the weather is good where you are, and I hope that you're enjoying your half term if you're on half term. So let's begin. I'm not very good at the preamble at the beginning of each lesson. I like to get stuck in. So today's lesson is about big ideas. And our function as readers of texts is to engage with the ideas. So the writer's aim, when they're writing, their ideal aim is for there to be a reader or readers that engage with the ideas on a page. Because in my very humble experience, it takes quite a lot to write down words on a page that you want somebody else to read. So the ideal for a writer is that readers engage with their ideas and not necessarily write analytical essays. I don't think there is an author that is writing today, or that ever wrote really, with the aim of getting other people to write essays about it. It's a very different kind of transaction that writers really want. They want readers to engage with their ideas on a page. So the lesson today is, what's the big idea? So today's lesson is all about big ideas. So what are they? What is a big idea? Can you think of a big idea in a text? So if you can think of a big idea, can you do me a favour and write that in the chat? So we're after a big idea in a text. Are you aware of them? It's a bit of a difficult question actually, but have a think anyway. What are the big ideas in books that you have read? What is the big message in some of the books that you've read? If you can, while I ramble on, note those in the chat. It might be that you find it easier to think about the people that had big ideas. So people like Shakespeare had a few big ideas and put them into many plays and sonnets and poems. Martin Luther King, he had a few big ideas, one of which was all about the freedom and equality of people. Can you think of any other people that have had big ideas recently? So Martin Luther King, Shakespeare. How about Greta? She's got some big ideas at the moment about climate change and how we should, as a race of beings, respond to the crises. And my personal favourite, Charlotte Mew, she had some amazing ideas about what love means. And this guy here, George Orwell, he had some pretty amazing ideas about abuses of power. So writers write their stories, and the best ones give us big ideas to think about. A great writer can change the way that we think about the world. Similarly with Charlotte Mew, who's a poet that wrote many, many years ago. Her love poetry is amazing, and I think has revealed to me different aspects of what love means. So great writers present big ideas and they want readers to engage in them. But they're not always easy to spot. And as we've talked about, so much of language is a code, or language is a code, and in order to understand it, we need a code-breaking system. Unfortunately, we have one. So we have our language code-breaking system with metaphors at the top, shape in the middle, and sound analysis at the bottom. So this is our toolkit when we are trying to analyse language. But where do big ideas fit? And can you think of any? So a big idea might very well be hidden in a poem. That's a pretty good idea to a pretty clever way to hide a big idea in a poem. And in Nelson Mandela, as I'm sure many of you know, was a freedom fighter, and he was fighting for the equality of all people, particularly in South Africa, regardless of the colour of their skin. And Nelson Mandela was imprisoned, he was a political prisoner for 27 years on Robben Island, after which he was freed, and then he became the president of South Africa. And one of the things that he read while he was imprisoned on Robben Island was a poem. And in this poem, he would recite it daily. They even made a film about it. The poem is called Invictus. And when I was teaching in schools, actually, I would have the last verse written on my wall. So we're going to have a quick read of this. And in this is hidden a big idea. So what I'd like you to have a think about is, what is the big idea? So here we go. This is the last verse of Invictus, which Nelson Mandela read while he was imprisoned on Robben Island. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments the scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. It's a very beautiful poem and wonderful lyrical qualities, but what on earth does it mean? And why did it help Nelson Mandela in his captivity? To really get to grips with what a big idea is, we need to be focusing on symbolism. And symbolism sits at the top of our triangle. Metaphor, personification, simile, and juxtaposition, as written here. There's another, which I'd like you to add really, and this is symbolism. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you, Chloe. Yes, that Nelson Mandela is in charge of himself. That's right. That he is the master of his own destiny. But it's quite strange because master and captain are words to do with sailing. They're words to do with captaining a ship or being the master on a ship. So what on earth has this stuff got to do with Nelson Mandela's big idea? And very much like metaphors, I mean, Chloe, you're absolutely right. This was something that he recited daily in prison, and it gave him that sense of purpose, and it made him feel like he was in charge of himself. And it's certainly what I wanted my students to feel when I was teaching in schools, that you can be in charge of yourself. But symbolism works in a very similar way to metaphor, personification, simile. And we do a very similar process. We separate the real from the unreal. We explore the unreal in isolation, and we come to our conclusions, although the symbolism approach is a little bit different. So today we're going to be looking at the writing of this man. And this man, I think, changed the way in which the 20th century viewed power and the way in which power corrupts. And he wrote wonderful stories, wonderful fairy stories, and wonderful fables, and wonderful autobiographies that really exposed many of the injustices that we experience. And that's what great writers do. They are seeking out a truth. They're seeking out a way of communicating that will reveal something about human experience, and they are trying to shine a light on what we can't see. And all of these people have done that. Shakespeare, perhaps more than many, even though his language is confusing, as we've already talked about. But Shakespeare wrote about some very complicated things. So too, Martin Luther King. His I Have a Dream speech was very beautiful and full of symbolism and ideology. These people intend to change the world. They intend to change the world for the better. They want to engage with our minds and make us think. And they present big ideas. So the big idea is, in this instance, that you can be in charge of yourself. It doesn't matter how difficult life is, you can be in charge of yourself. So we're going to look at some text today, and we're going to explore some big ideas, and we're going to use a very clever, well, I think clever, plan. And here it is. We hone, which means to target. We hone in on an image. So an image, as we've talked about, is a metaphor, simile, personification, juxtaposition, and symbolism. Words and ideas in text represent things. They symbolise things. So we're going to try and hone in on an image. So if we look at this poem here, where are the images here? Perhaps you can write that in the chat. Where are the images? Well, there's no metaphors here, but what is the poet making us look at? A gate, I should mention, is a small channel. It's a very thin channel. What is he making us think about or look at? So in our symbolism strategy, we hone in on an image, and then we explore it in isolations, and then we draw our conclusions and think big. And our conclusions have to be about people, love, justice, freedom, equality, kindness, and human nature. Writers, the best writers, are trying to shine a light on these things: love, justice, freedom, human nature, what it means to be alive. And sometimes they present their bigger ideas wrapped up in symbolism, whether it is the symbol of love in Shakespeare's sonnets, represented as a flower, as a rose. Writers hide their big ideas in symbols, and symbols are, of course, images. So in this poem, where are the images? Any ideas? Well, straight the gate. Well, a gate is a small channel, so the image here is a small channel, a difficult to navigate channel. Like one strait that comes to mind is the Strait of Gibraltar, which sits between the southern tip of Spain and the northern tip of Africa, and it's a very narrow channel which is difficult to sail through. So why a channel like that? Why is that a symbol for keeping on going? So, as per our plan, what we do is we separate that image and explore it in isolation. So that thin channel. So what does a thin channel imply? That it is difficult to traverse. It is difficult to navigate. Not many can pass through. Only the best captains and masters can navigate it. So just thinking about that last point, I agree, Chloe, you're absolutely right. He is in charge for himself, but there's also a sense that he is recognising that only the best can travel through this narrow passage, this narrow channel. And that gives us an impression as to what the big idea is. If you have enough skill and determination, if you believe in yourself, if you are skillful enough, then you can traverse difficult waters and be in charge of yourself. So now we're going to look at some writing of George Orwell. And the first piece is something that you've seen before. Yeah, lovely, Chloe. No matter what difficulties are thrown at you, you can get through it. Exactly. So we're going to try and identify symbols in the extracts you're about to see, and then think about what they've got to do with these big ideas. So that's to do with whether the big ideas are to do with justice or love, human nature, freedom, equality and kindness. So some really big ideas. So let's have a look at the first little extract, one that you've already seen if you've seen these videos before, a little extract at the beginning of Animal Farm. There are no metaphors in this first beginning. There's no similes, but there is symbolism. There are aspects of the text that symbolise things. So see if you can find out what these are while I read them. Mr. Jones of the Manor Farm had locked the hen houses for the night, but was too drunk to remember to shut the potholes. With the ring of light from his lantern dancing from side to side, he lurched across the yard, kicked off his boots at the back door, drew himself a last glass of beer from the barrel in the scullery, and made his way up to bed where Mrs. Jones was already snoring. Aspects of this are significant. They are signs. So where are the signs? What could they be? What do you think? So Mr. Jones was too drunk. So that could be significant. I think it is certainly. As a farmer, being too drunk is significant. He's careless, as you can see. What else? He's lurching from side to side. What could that imply? And perhaps the last one, the glass of beer from the barrel. So what do these things symbolise? So we've got he's drunk, he is lurching, and he's also drawing himself a glass of beer. What do these things represent? So we take one at a time. So let's take the drunk one first of all. So let's see if we can pass it through this strategy. So we hone in on an image. So that is the fact that the farmer is drunk. And then we explore it in isolation. So what does being drunk imply? So in the chat, if you can write what being drunk implies, that'd be great. What does it tell us about the person who's drunk? What does being drunk mean? And perhaps while you're doing that, try and think about lurching. That's that swaying movement that drunks often have when they're lurching from side to side. What does that imply? He is not in control. Absolutely. If we think that's a great conclusion, Chloe, you're absolutely right. So what does that say about people? What is Orwell saying about people in responsibility? And what we're trying to do there, what my questioning is trying to lead you towards, is some of these overarching big ideas. So writers are trying to say things that are big, such as, what does it mean to be kind? What does it mean to be alive? Does it mean to be human? What is kindness? So in this instance, we have a farmer. It begins the novel, and in Animal Farm, of course, quite obviously, the animals take over. But this is our first introduction to Mr. Jones, and it's significant that he's drunk. It's significant that he's drunk. What is Orwell saying now about people in positions of responsibility? And you draw your conclusions. So your conclusion about the fact that Orwell was drunk, Chloe, was that he's not in control. If we think about that wider question, what is Orwell trying to say about people in responsibility? That he is not taking his responsibility seriously, good, and that equally people in power don't take their responsibility seriously. And that's really interesting, isn't it? Perhaps Orwell is taking a sideswipe, I think he probably is actually, at people that aren't taking responsibility seriously. Do we know people that are in positions of authority that don't take their responsibility seriously? Try and avoid answering in the chat there, but perhaps there are some that you know that don't take their responsibility seriously enough. And Orwell is drawing our attention to it. Let's move on to lurch then. It might seem that it's so related to being drunk, but what does lurch imply? This is that movement, that swaying movement. What is it a sign for? Not being in control? What else? Why do people lurch when they're drunk? What are they struggling with? While I leave you to answer that question, I'm going to just move on to the last aspect of Animal Farm that I want to look at, which is the drawing of the glass of beer. So what's that a sign for? What might that imply? So we've got the lurching. Why do people lurch? They're struggling with balance. Fantastic. Thank you, Chloe. That's exactly what I wanted you to say. So what is Orwell saying about people in responsibility? He's saying that they lack balance. He's saying that they aren't steady, that they can too easily be persuaded one way that doesn't benefit others. And that's very much what the whole novel is about, or novella is about. Leaders in this novel, and perhaps overarchingly, struggle with maintaining balance, keeping, again I'm going to use a nautical metaphor, on an even keel. So well done, Chloe, you're absolutely spot on. When we're analysing literature, we try and spot the metaphor certainly, but try and spot the symbolism as well. So we've got too drunk, we've got lurching, and we've also got the last glass of beer. I wonder, there's Martin Luther King, I wonder what drawing the last glass of beer's got to do with it. Why might that be important? What does that suggest? I mean, from a personal perspective, when I go to bed, I don't think I need a drink to send me on my way. It's quite a strange thing to have a drink of beer before you go to bed. What does that imply? Also, drinking beer and drinking alcohol is, it's certainly a choice, but some people consider it to be a bit of a luxury. It seems that he is maybe even spoiling himself, and that he's drawing himself a last glass of beer suggests he's got a huge quantity of it. So he's maybe spoiling himself. There's also a suggestion that maybe he's drinking it because he can't sleep, but I don't think he's all that worried actually. He doesn't strike me as a particularly worried person. But if it's to do with spoiling himself, having a great quantity of things, that suggests that maybe Orwell is saying that people in responsibility spoil themselves. They have vast quantities of things. Perhaps they have vast quantities of money. Perhaps beer is a euphemism or a symbol for luxury items. So the thing to remember is that when writers put pen to page, they want you to engage with their ideas. And they present these ideas in imagery. But they're always trying to say something that is hidden, that is deep, that is to do with being alive. And they are the best. They're the best books to read, whether it's a book about love, Love in a Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. It's a beautiful book, all about the endurance, how love can endure a lifetime, which is wonderful and makes us consider how potentially love can endure a lifetime. Or if it's Animal Farm, about the abuse of people in responsibility. And these ideas are presented in symbols. Okay, and it's just worth recognising that when we're trying to draw our conclusions, these big idea conclusions, we think about people, love, justice, freedom, equality, kindness, and human nature. So we're going to look now at perhaps Orwell's more famous novel, and this is 1984. 1984 is, well, you make your mind up. I'm just going to read the first page, and then we're going to look at a particular extract in more detail. You can read along if you like, or just listen. And it's quite wordy, this, but perhaps just read along. And while you do, this really is the trick. Think about what the symbols are are there details in what I'm about to read that are symbols, that are striking in their image? And if they are, can you write them down? Ideally write them in the chat. A symbol. It could be as abstract as a bowler hat. It could be an item that you think at first glance it isn't significant, but it might very well be. The thing about writers is, and I get asked this question quite a lot, is that they intend to write every word down. Every word is important. So have a look for those symbols and write them down and have a think what they might mean. So I'll read it. Oh, not that one, this one. This is the beginning of 1984 by George Orwell. It was a bright cold day in April and the clocks were striking 13. Winston Smith, his chin nuzzled into his breast in an effort to escape the vile wind, slipped quickly through the glass doors of Victory Mansions, though not quickly enough to prevent a swirl of gritty dust from entering along with him. The hallway smelt of boiled cabbage and old rag mats. At one end of it, a coloured poster, too large for indoor display, had been tacked to the wall. It depicted simply an enormous face, more than a metre wide, the face of a man of about 45 with a heavy black moustache and ruggedly handsome features. Winston made for the stairs. It was no use trying the lift. Even at the best of times, it was seldom working, and at present the electric current was cut off during daylight hours. It was part of the economy drive in preparation for Hate Week. The flat was 7 flights up, and Winston, who was 39, had a varicose ulcer above his right ankle, went slowly, resting several times on the way. On each landing opposite the lift shaft, the poster with the enormous face gazed from the wall. It was one of those pictures which are so contrived that the eyes follow you about when you move. Big Brother is watching you, the caption beneath it ran. So there's a lot there. There's a lot of symbolism there. And what I'd like you to do is identify the symbols and see if you can spot one. It's just worth recognising that Orwell wrote about the abuses of power, and the perspective in this extract compared to Animal Farm certainly seems to be about people. Winston seems to be an everyman, if not somewhat quite poor, rather than somebody like the farmer, Jones, who's in a position of responsibility. So what are the symbols? So remember, we find the symbols, we hone in on them, then we explore them in isolation, and we draw conclusions. So we've got some conclusions about people, justice, freedom, human nature. Let's zone in a bit then on a particular aspect of Animal Farm. So, not Animal Farm, 1984. So here we have a little bit. It was no use trying the lift. Even at the best of times, it was seldom working, and at present the electric current was cut off during daylight hours. It was part of the economy drive in preparation for Hate Week. So what do your conclusions say about people, love, justice, freedom, equality, kindness and human nature? Well, what is Hate Week, firstly? Well, it seems to be something that is like, it sounds almost like a festival week, although it doesn't sound very jolly. It sounds like it's something that everybody takes part in. But what about the fact the lift was seldom working? What does that tell you? Even at the best of times it was seldom working, and at present the electric current was cut off during daylight hours. So what does the fact the lift is broken or not working or without electricity tell us? What does that suggest? Well, it suggests that there's not enough money to pay for the electricity. But it also suggests that something that is important, well, it certainly suggests that Winston is living in a tall building, But what else could it symbolise? Well, it could symbolise there's no electricity, there's not enough money, they're living in an impoverished state, they're living in a state with very difficult conditions, they're living in a state where common everyday things like lifts are not used to conserve money. So what does all this tell us about the big picture? What might George Orwell be saying about the people that are in control, or the people that control society? What do you think he might be saying? The lift isn't working. What does that tell us about the people that are controlling society? It's really important that when you are reading, you're aware that every word the writer writes is intended to engage with you and to make you think about a big idea. And what you've got to do is you've got to hone in on that symbol and think about it in isolation, whether it's a channel in It Matters Not How Straight the Gate, and think about what that might imply, or whether it's the drunk farmer in Animal Farm, or here, whether it's a broken lift, and think about what these things symbolise, what they might mean. And you have to spend some time ruminating, thinking about it, considering the idea. And when you've done that, you can draw your conclusions and you can come up with a big idea. I think here Orwell is suggesting that people in responsibility abuse their power, people in responsibility make society suffer, people in responsibility make sure that they can control people by only giving them, not even luxuries, but everyday electricity, providing they conform to the rules. So have a think about what the big ideas are in text and try and follow that process. Hone in on a symbol, explore it in isolation, and draw your conclusions. Make sure your conclusions link to a big idea. Now, if you'd like to, you can send some work in. This is a bit more challenging for this video, but have a look at this last quote. This is from 1984, and have a think about what Orwell was trying to say. So, the question we could use for this is, how does Orwell use language to present his ideas? And in this answer, you can spend time thinking about the symbols presented in this little quote here, and then exploring how they contribute to his overall message. It's quite a big ask, but when we're reading beautiful works of literature, we need to be mindful that there are hidden in symbolism really important ideas for us to engage and think about. And if we do that, then it'll perhaps influence the way that we look at the world and maybe even improve us as human beings. Have a good weekend. Please stay safe and well. You can obviously continue to like and subscribe on our YouTube channel and hit the notifications button so you don't miss the beginning of our lesson. You can look at our Facebook page and our Instagram, and if you want to send any work in, whether you're watching now live or whether you are watching this recorded, please send your work into lockdownlessons@skoolcornwall.com. Take care, and we'll see you next week. All the best. Bye.